Hello, Santa Fe. I'm Carlene, and welcome to Living Santa Fe, along with Voting Santa Fe. We're going to dedicate this show today. My guest is Alex Curtis, who's a media director for the Secretary of State's office, correct?
Yes, the communications director, but yeah, I do all the media.
Okay, you lucky thing.
a lot of work nowadays.
It's a lot of work, yes. And I want to thank you for being here. Certainly. I'm going to go a little bit back into history. 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment passed on August the 26th, 1920, securing the vote for women, and it was added to the Constitution. There were quite a few women involved in this. They got their full citizenship and the right to vote. The New Mexico women realized that the vote was a powerful tool, and it could create a world that they wanted to be a part of. But they had some serious, significant sacrifices that they made, not only here in New Mexico, but all over the United States. There were women that were beat up, thrown into jail, force-fed. It was a pretty rough time for women, but they finally got the vote. And I'd like to mention 3 women from New Mexico that were involved in this. There was Nina Otero, Aurora Lucero, and Lola Armijo. This amendment was passed, and it ensured the rights for women to vote. So we're celebrating that this year.
All year.
100 years ago. That's not very long that women have had the right to vote.
Nope, not very long at all. And I would say, too, that they, the passage of the 19th Amendment was amazing milestone, but, many women were still kind of left out of that promise even after it was passed.
That's right.
And still had to wait many decades to fulfill that full promise. But it is still a wonderful anniversary, something we should definitely be celebrating.
But, when's so good for some people? Native Americans didn't get it till 1948, and that was through the Trujillo versus Garley law suit that they had. Then the Asians, because of World War II, they didn't get their citizenship or the right to vote until 1952. And 1965 for black men and black women. That was because of the Jim Crow rules that were in the South, which were terribly unfair. So they didn't get their voting rights till 1965. What a shame.
And that's really not that long ago.
Now, it's going to be a different story. They're out campaigning and working with all parties, I'd like to mention a little bit about this flag. I had several of my friends that give me ideas. They said, well, you ought to put flags all around this when you do that interview. And no, I said, this small one, it's small, but it's mighty. It represents all of us. I don't care how big the flag is, how flashy it is, a small one works. Alex, how did you get started working for the Secretary of State? Give me a little background on yourself.
Sure. Well, I used to do communications for several nonprofit advocacy organizations in the state. During that time, I had the pleasure to work with Maggie at the Bernalillo County Clerk's office when she was Bernalillo County Clerk. And then, kind of had that background in communications. And then when she needed a communications director a couple years ago, I came on board. That was right before the 2018 elections. So it's been a whirlwind. It's definitely not it's never a dull moment, especially with the run up to this 2020 election, and just kind of the way that elections and voting have become quite a flashpoint in the nation and the state. There's a lot to do all the time.
Well, you know, we're trying to do our part. We're a small station, but we tried to do a lot of shows during this pandemic to encourage people to make them understand that they're appreciated, and this is a very important show we're doing today.
Sure.
Because we want to encourage people to get out and vote. But we are taking place, voting's taking place in a divided America. We are told in a baseless claim that widespread mail-in voting will lead to inaccurate and fraudulent voting. We're also being told that the vote can't be postponed. This is false, because it can be postponed. The date of every presidential election was set by Congress in 1845, and only Congress can change it. So that's a set date. So no one can just change the vote. You know, back in the 40s and 50s, I used to go with my parents to vote. I was just a little kid. And I remember I was with them when they had the Adlai Stevenson and General Eisenhower. And I remember I was sitting in the back seat of the car, and my mom and dad were going back and forth. And my dad said, "I'm going to cancel out your vote." He was for Eisenhower. Well, my mother, she was for Stevenson. And she was the kind of woman back then, a lot of women would vote with their husbands. And she said, "I'm going to cancel your vote." So that's the way it went that whole time. But I remember they had emphasized what an honor it was to be able to vote, and what a privilege it was.
Sure.
So I was just a kid, but I remember that quite well. Did you go with your parents to vote? I know you're a lot younger than I am. What was your experience?
I was going to ask you if you remember, was that back where they pulled a big
Oh, yeah.
big lever?
My
there would be
parents
like a
did
giant,
the paper.
oh
You know,
yeah.
They had little, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
We,
I
we,
remember
we've got
that.
some kind of archive things in the Secretary of State's office, and I've seen one that it was a ballot. I mean, it was like the size of this fireplace, and it had, you know, all the parties listed, and I don't even know how it would have worked, but you would have gone into this thing, and then you like punched in the holes, and then it was just crazy. I mean, it's just interesting, very interesting to see the evolution of those things. I was just thinking the first time I voted would have been when I was away in college in Washington, D.C. I probably voted. I voted by absentee first time. I'm from Nevada, and I don't remember. No, that's not true. I do remember going to the polls with my mom at least, and you know, going into the booth. And my mom worked for the government. My dad was a lawyer, so I've kind of been involved in this for a while, and have good voting memories. And you know, and then with all the talk about absentee, I've been thinking a lot about. Oh yeah, that was my first time. That was the Kerry Bush election, I believe. So yes, a few years after, you know, Stevenson and Eisenhower. Not that you voted in that one, but
No, well, I did vote in that one, but I was a little bit older.
okay.
Not much, just a couple of years. You know, we've had some bad information out there lately. The president has said he could starve the U.S. Postal Service of money in order to make it harder to get a surge of voters. There was also that he was worried it might cost him the election. He's been laying the groundwork in case he wins this election. Is he going to leave? I mean, we've got the electoral vote, we've got the popular vote. It's a very difficult one. This is a baseless claim. I have no problem with the Postal Service. It's slow, but it's still working here in New Mexico.
Sure.
And my feeling is people get so many things from the Postal Service. They get their, I know all the state employees that are retired get their checks through the, you know.
Yeah, medicines. Yeah, all your taxes, you know, all that stuff goes right through the mail, and people are very comfortable sending those kinds of things through the mail.
Yeah. So, I don't know, some of these things we have to not pay so much attention to. What are you doing to, are you working with the post office people? You're working with the post office union?
Yeah, so I could kind of go through some of the ways in which we have been in touch and work with the Postal Service. I would say first, you know, to viewers that they, like you said, I mean, people should have trust in their postal service, their postal workers, and their election administrators, and using the mail to cast an absentee ballot is perfectly legitimate, acceptable, safe, and efficient. And there will be, we in New Mexico are following USPS guidelines, and this comes from our continued conversations with them, the Office of the Secretary of State, that we've been in conversation with them even before the primary earlier this year. I mean, obviously there's always absentee ballots in every election, so we have always had interactions with them, but specifically once COVID hit, you know, we knew as election administrators that the mail balloting was going to be a really big deal. So we had to make sure we were involved in those conversations from the beginning. And so I would just say that just again, yes, we do have constant interaction with our local and regional representatives.
Okay.
And part of why people may have seen that a couple of weeks ago, it was in the news that 46 states got a letter from the USPS saying that there were concerns about the deadlines that they had in states, and there were concerns that voters wouldn't be able to get their ballots back in time, and they may not be counted and whatnot. This was all during the hubbub about Postmaster General DeJoy, taking away sorting machines and mailboxes and things like that. And so, but viewers should also probably know that New Mexico is one of 4 states that got the opposite letter from the USPS. So that we are in line with their best practices in terms of how much time you need to mail your ballot back. And so that's what we have in New Mexico now. We are suggesting make sure you mail your ballot back by October 27th. That's a week before November 3rd, because that gives you enough time for the Postal Service. Because it can, it can be slower in certain parts of the nation and the state specifically. If you're in a more rural county in New Mexico, it's reasonable to assume that sometimes your mail might take a little longer to get to. Some people might not know, if you live in certain parts of the state, your mail goes to Texas and then comes back into New Mexico. And so, people might not know that in Santa Fe. You live in Santa Fe, your mail goes down to Albuquerque, then it comes back up to Santa Fe. So, that can be a conversation for another time, but that's how it works. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say that, yes, we are in constant communication with them. Because of that communication, we were able to, during the special legislative session back in June, put some things into that bill that aligned with USPS best practices, and that's why voters in New Mexico should feel confident in putting their ballot in the mail, and that it will get back to their county clerk if they do it before October 27th.
Yeah. The last time I voted, I had a little incident. I had voted online voting, and I never got my vote.
Never got the ballot?
Never got the ballot,
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Never came to me. So I thought, gee, that's odd. I called the Secretary of State's office and told them. They said, oh, that was mailed out on such and such a date. And then I called county clerk's office, and they said the same thing. That was already sent out, same date that the Secretary of State's office had. So I thought, well, maybe it was dumped out at somebody's house, and sometimes people just throw stuff away. They think it's junk mail. Mm-hmm. So I went down to the parking area at the county clerk's office just before I voted. Mm-hmm. I went to the lady that judged it, and I said, this is my problem. I said, I want to cancel that vote out that didn't come to me, and I want a new one. And she said, absolutely. So she went upstairs. I had to show her my driver's license. I had to give her my Social Security, date of birth, the whole thing. And she went up, she canceled out the old vote, gave me the new one, and I put it in the drop box right there.
Yeah.
So they're very good. People are very good that work on those polls. They're very helpful.
Definitely, and I think what that illustrates is that something that I like to say and that people should know in New Mexico, there are multiple ways to cast your ballot in New Mexico. Even if you might get into one of those circumstances too,
Sure.
You can cast it through the mail. You could also have gotten that ballot, filled it out, decided you didn't want to put it back in the mail, or maybe you waited a bit too long. It was just a couple days before election day, so you knew it wouldn't get back there. Well, you can just drop that absentee ballot off at any polling location in your county.
That's right.
Or at your county clerk's office, or you can vote in person, of course, on election day or early voting. And situations like that do arise where even if you had gotten the ballot in the mail, you could have still just gone down there and said, I got it, but I'm here now, and so cancel that one. They cancel that one out, and then you just vote there that day. So, New Mexico specifically, it should be a point of pride. It's certainly a point of pride for our office, and I'd like to preach the word that it should be a point of pride for all New Mexicans. We're often at the bottom of some lists that we'd rather not be at the bottom of, but I can definitely tell you we are at the top of the list when it comes to best practices in terms of voting in elections.
That's right, and we're one of 25 states that can do it online now. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have online voter registration, we have online absentee ballot requests. You can track your ballot. I think you were mentioning that there too. You can go online. You actually didn't have to call the county clerk or the Secretary of State's office. There is a way through nmvote.org where you can track the status of your ballot. We've already had that functionality in place, but one of the other things we're implementing for the general election are these intelligent mail barcodes that people may have heard of. And this is just a way to basically better track exactly the status of your application and your ballot, more like how you would do it with a UPS package or something like that, where you can tell, okay, my application's got in on this date, they accepted it on this date, they sent me the ballot on this date, it's in the mail then. I got it, I sent it back, they received it back, and then they counted it on this date. Like that level of information, which is a great practice to have, and something that I think makes voters feel more comfortable about the process and provides transparency.
Okay. There was a little bit of confusion. I know some of my neighbors got a ballot, and it was sent out by a nonprofit group called the Center for Voter Information. Now that is a legitimate group.
Yes, and what they received was an absentee ballot application in the mail, and that application does come from the Center for Voter Information. They are a nonprofit, but they are using the same form that you can already download from our website if you go to Secretary of State, or that you can get from your county clerk.
Right.
And that's why it's an acceptable form that if you fill that out, send it back to your county clerk, they're gonna put you on the list and you're gonna get a ballot if you're an eligible voter.
Well, right away somebody said, oh, they're going to get my vote, and then they're going to get this vote, and they're going to get it all messed up. But no, only one vote can be sent out to a registered voter.
Yes. If only one ballot can be requested per voter, and you will not be getting multiple ballots in the mail, from any county clerk.
So if you request an absentee ballot, you go online to the Secretary of State's office, correct?
That's one way to request it, yes, at nmvote.org.
Okay. Then the county clerk's office will send, I want to make that really clear, only one, in other words, you'll only be able to vote one time, even if you get that other one.
So yes, so in a scenario that could definitely happen easily, right? So you get that Center for Voter Information mailer in the mail, and then you're also in Santa Fe County because Santa Fe County is one of the counties that county clerks, the county clerk in Santa Fe, along with Bernalillo and some other counties, they will be automatically sending absentee ballot applications to every registered voter in the county, starting on September 14th.
Right.
And so say you got that one in the mail, but then you also got the one from the Center for Voter Information, then you got the one from the county clerk, and say you fill them both out, send them both back.
Yeah.
Don't do that, please, because that is confusing and
it
creates
be-
more redundant work for
Yes.
county clerks. But they will only accept one of those
One
applications, the first one that comes
So
in.
if you send in 10 of those,
You're only going to get one.
vote.
Only one application is going to get accepted, and then only one ballot's going to get sent out to you from that application.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. And you were going to be preparing a little information thing that we could put on our cameras.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and that'll have all the other information that we need to have on it. But we'll discuss it just kind of briefly.
Sure.
What about the pandemic? How are you making this safe?
Sure. Sure.
How are they making voting safe?
Well, I would say, first off, again, going back to that, there are multiple ways to cast your ballot in New Mexico. So if you do not feel comfortable going to vote in person at a polling place, we definitely urge you to use an absentee ballot and vote through the mail. But if you are just one of those people, I mean, I'm like this. I just usually have to work the election, so I can't really usually go. I would rather go to a polling place. I like the experience. I like the camaraderie and community.
It's kind of fun.
It's fun. I just like being there. I like filling it out and and handing it in and watching it go through the tabulator and getting those I vote stickers, which we're not going to have. So I'm trying to do some stuff at the Secretary of State so that when if you cast your ballot absentee or something, there's at least something you can put on your social media or something, because everyone loves those stickers. But say you want to go and vote in person. A couple things that people should know. All counties and the polling locations in those counties will be stocked with PPE, the personal protective equipment. So for poll workers, and so they were going to be following proper cleaning procedures, cleaning pens, surfaces, that kind of thing. There's going to be social distancing in place there. Likely will be capacity limits inside polling places themselves. Will likely be over the 10 that the public health orders are saying now, but will be a small amount of people in there. And like I said, the cleaning procedures, these things that make it that we're all the precautions that we're taking in other parts of our lives right now at restaurants and hotels and the office and that kind of thing will be in place at in-person polling places, both during early voting and on election day. So people should feel safe in going and voting in person. I would just wear a mask, follow all guidelines, and you'll be fine if you'd like to do that.
And the poll workers, I have to say, it seems like we have the same ones every year. They're usually retired people that need something to do. They get paid a little bit, I guess, for it. And they're very careful. I noticed last time I went to Gonzales School, I needed one of the yellow sheets, they have that show everybody that's running. And I started to go in, and this fellow stopped me. He says, "You can't go in there." And I looked at him like, "Why?" And he says, "You just can't. I'll get the yellow sheet for you." So he went and got it, and he was not allowing anybody in. They're so careful to make sure they're doing the right thing, because if you get caught doing something that's not right, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Well,
and these are all older people, usually most of them retired, and they just do it because they really feel like they need to do something,
Sure.
So,
well, and that actually gives me a good opportunity to plug another kind of message that we're trying to get out there from the Secretary of State's office is that counties need more poll workers for the election because, like you said, many of the poll workers that counties traditionally rely on tend to be older, 60 and older, which are obviously that subset of people are also more susceptible to COVID. And so counties have found, definitely during the primary, and we're expecting this for the general, that they're going to have fewer people who may have traditionally worked the polls. And so we're trying to get the message out there that counties need poll workers, and so you can go to nmvote.org. Again, there's a link where you can fill in some contact information, and we basically send that information over to the counties, and they're going to follow up with individuals who would like to work the polls. Like you said, it is a paid position. It's a temporary position, but it is paid, and you just have to be a registered voter, take a little training, and not be a relative of anyone who's on the ballot, or on the ballot yourself, or a law enforcement officer. So if you're not any of those things and are registered to vote, want to make a little extra cash, either contact your county clerk directly or go to nmvote.org and you can get signed up there.
Okay, my neighbor called the county clerk's office and said she wanted to volunteer. And they said, well, we don't need you right now, we're filled up. Well, she wants to do it, so I told her that you would call her.
Okay.
See, I'm throwing it off on you.
Hey, I can do it.
And I've got her telephone number right here.
Okay.
And she'll be so impressed to
Okay,
get a call
I'll do
from
it.
the Secretary of State's
Okay.
office. She wants to do something. She said, is there going to be a second line of defense there, to fill in? If the ballots come in, huge amount of them, you got to have people counting them. I mean, it could be a big turnout.
Well, we're expecting a surge in absentee balloting, certainly. And when we're talking about poll workers, there's poll officials. There is a variety of roles they can play. There's the presiding judge, like you were talking about earlier, who you interact with. There's the people who are signing you in and getting you your ballots. But then, of course, there's also the people who process the ballots, and absentee ballots take a lot of time, and this is why part of the reason why we need more poll workers, because there's the absentee ballot process is a concurrent process with regular voting, but a somewhat separate process where they come in, the absentee ballots, they have to be separated from the inner and outer envelopes. They get separated out. You can't actually count until election day, but you can start doing these processes that allow for a bit more efficiency.
Well, she's one of the younger ones, and I'm sure she's willing to come and do anything.
And there are lots of these roles that need to be filled.
There are going to be a lot of people doing that, and so don't tell them, just cut them off, say, well, we have enough. Just say, we'll put you on a list, or whatever.
Yeah, or something like that, right? And I would say too that there's a couple things that you can, if you're not going to go through the county clerk, there are other opportunities to help during the election. There are advocacy organizations like Common Cause and others that do what they call election protection work, where you might be,
League of Women Voters.
You might be, manning a phone booth, a phone line where people are calling in with questions, that day, that kind of thing. So there are other opportunities to help contribute to the election, and so we hope people will take advantage of those too, if certain counties are all full up with workers. Though I think that there's lots of roles that could probably be filled, that counties still need help with.
Yeah. Now, if you go online, you need to provide your birth date, your driver's license number, and the last 4 digits of your Social Security number.
So if you are going to apply for an absentee ballot online, you don't necessarily need a driver's license. You just need a state issued ID.
Okay.
And then you will need to. There's a number of required bits of information. You have to do that. This is, again, just online if you do it that way, because of the way that the information gets shared back and forth between our office and county clerks and the MBD and this kind of thing. Oh, if I could just mention one thing, I knew I was going to say something more about poll working, just about, it's a great opportunity to get younger people involved in
Yes.
the kind of civics process and the democratic process. That we find that when young people vote and or are involved in voting and election activity, they will continue that for their entire lives. And so poll working is another great way to get younger people involved in something that is really important for our democracy, but that also kind of cultivates a sense of that civic duty that they'll carry with them. So if you're thinking about, I might want to go work the polls, and you have a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, at home or something like that, they might want to go too. You can do it together, and that's a great way to get them involved, and that will likely keep them involved in the democratic process going forward into their lives.
I predict that this will be the election. There will be more younger people voting than they ever have, because I notice
So.
now, they're involved in the gun rights. They're involved in the climate change. So a new generation is coming up,
Sure.
and they want their world to be right. And so I think we're going to get a lot of young voters out there, and it's very important that they show up.
Yeah, definitely.
And start the process, because the world is changing, and it's some of it's good, some of it's not so good. I don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now, but it doesn't look good.
Well, and if you don't vote, you can't complain.
That's
right?
right.
The old adage.
That's right. I told somebody the other day, I said, I'm going to see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse riding down in my neighborhood, because the floods and the
man.
heat and the wind and the fires and everything.
Pandemic and
the pandemic. I mean, it's kind of scary in a way.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it'll work its way out. I know that. We always do, but it's something to think about. So, okay, you've got your iron law online. One thing when your ballot is received in the mail, you have to sign it. Sometimes people forget to sign, and you also have to give them the last 4 digits of your Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
So be sure and sign it.
I will say on that, though, that something that was instituted during the special session is that if you do make a mistake in that sending back of the absentee ballot and you forget to sign it, or it's like illegible and they can't read it or something like that, that the county clerks are required to contact you within 24 hours to
Right.
tell you, hey, we could not accept your ballot for this reason, and here's how you can fix it. And so voters should know that. Yes, do pay attention to all the directions. Make sure you put in your signature and your last 4 of your Social Security on that envelope when you send it back in if you're going to vote absentee. But there is this additional safeguard that we've put into place to make sure that if your ballot is rejected, that you know about it before the election is over and you can't do anything about it.
Okay. Now, I understand, and these figures I'm just popping off because I read it somewhere, that there are 1,310,000, almost 311,000 voters in New Mexico. Is that pretty correct?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think I looked at that the other day. That's registered voters as of August 31st, actually, as of yesterday or the day before.
Okay. Now, we will add this to our film today, but September 14th, I want everybody to get these dates. We'll add it to the show.
Sure.
But September 14th, county clerks can start sending absentee ballot applications. October 6th, absentee voting begins.
Then that's also the first day that county clerks can send the actual absentee ballots out to people.
Okay. October 17th, early voting begins.
And again, and that's kind of what we call expanded early voting. That's when the kind of satellite locations throughout the county where you can go and show up in person will open. Though from October 6th to October 17th, you can still vote. You just have to go to your county clerk's office. You can vote in person. You just have to go to your county clerk's office.
Okay.
But in general, October 17th is when people should expect, if you want to go and vote early in person, that's when you can start doing that.
And October 20th is the last date you can request
An absentee
ballot.
Uh-huh.
And November 3rd is election
Is
day.
election day, and then like I said before, October 27th is that week before election day that we suggest you get that mailed ballot in the mail no later than that date. So that's another important one. And because and people might not know this, we're not what's known as a postmark state. So it doesn't matter when your ballot actually gets in the mail. It just matters that it's back in the hands of the county clerk by 7 p.m. on election day.
Yes.
And so that's why you want to leave that leeway there. And and election administrators, and that's another way that we work with the post office. There's especially on election day, there's like a constant stream of like, go to the post office or the postal facility, go back to the county clerk warehouse, just getting every ballot that is coming in up to 7 p.m. on election day.
Now, one last question I want to ask you is, oftentimes we have people that come to vote and they might not be able to read English or speak English. Do you have people at the voting polls that will help people? Because if you're a new citizen or something, you come in here and you're looking at this thing, you don't know what to do, and then they got the machine over here, and they got women that you have to go see and sign in and all that. It is a different, for somebody
Well, it can
that's
be.
new is a difficult process.
Sure.
So I know at one time you had people that were there to help.
Sure, there is language assistance available at any polling location. It might not necessarily be a physical person there,
Yeah.
but there are, we have this all kind of set up in terms of phone lines and hotlines and things like that. Of course, too, because if, it's one thing if you speak Spanish, but if you speak Farsi or something like that, it
Yeah.
might know we don't have
Yeah.
a ballot in Farsi, but we can figure, something out like that way. But we do have ballots in Spanish. Or instruct, on the ballots, it's in English and Spanish, and then at polling locations you can receive language assistance if you need it.
Okay, now the yellow sheets, that's a guide that you can get before you vote and write everything down so it doesn't take you forever.
Yeah, and you can also do that
How do you
online.
get those?
You can also download. Basically, you're downloading a sample ballot online that
Okay.
you can either print it out and fill it out, or you can just keep it on your phone. That kind of thing. But it gives you a way to. It speeds up your process for one thing, and it's just gives you a chance to research candidates, research those ballot questions, bond issues. There's going to be some constitutional amendment questions on the ballot this year. It's going to, depending on where you live, it's going to be a fairly long ballot. I would imagine. Make sure you flip that ballot over. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I have voted before and forgot to fill out the backside of a ballot.
Yeah.
And so flip that thing over. And I think it's going to go well, and we're confident about how the election's going to be run. And we're getting a lot, I will say, about, even though it's sadly become, it's kind of a toxic partisanship in the air nowadays. The voting elections have become this kind of partisan issue, sadly and unnecessarily, I think. But people are, the election administrators in New Mexico and around the country, they are committed to running a very efficient, safe, secure election, and we're gonna see a big turnout. But it's going to go off well, and I encourage people to get out there and vote. The one thing that I might say too, that should be in people's minds, because of the amount of all the things we've been talking about, the amount of absentee ballots, troubles, potential troubles with hiring poll workers, this kind of toxic partisanship, these kind of baseless claims of fraud and things like that. It's possible that not all election results are going to be in by the end of the night on November 3rd.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say before that, after every election, counting still goes on. There's still, everyone kind of, as a voter, election day's over at 7 p.m. on election day, right? But for election administrators, every election, not just this election, there are procedures that go on far beyond election day. Of course, there's the canvasses, there's potential recounts, there's all these kinds of things. And so that's just to say that in a quote unquote normal election, all the votes aren't necessarily in at the end of the night anyway. But in this election, what I think is important to emphasize is that I think people can think that if the election results aren't in right then, that means some kind of fraud is taking place or something is happening nefariously with the county clerks or election administrators, and that is not the case. And people should understand that this is a normal process anyway. But what you might see because of this influx in absentee ballots specifically is that counting might go on beyond election day. And in New Mexico specifically, again referring back to that the June special legislative session, the election bill that was passed there specifically says that county clerks must stop counting at 11 p.m. on election night, absentee ballots at least, and resume counting the next morning. This is obviously so, we want efficiency, but we want accuracy more than we want efficiency, right? I think most people would agree with that you'd rather have your election results be precise and accurate rather than just get them as quickly as possible. And so that's just to say people should, there's a possibility that not all election results will be in. That does not mean anything nefarious is going on. It's a normal procedure, but with this influx of absentee ballots, we might then see that's then compounded in New Mexico specifically by this provision that county clerks need to stop counting and then restart the counting the next day to prevent fatigue, but also to, in the service of accuracy.
Yeah. Well, this is not QAnon that we're talking about here. This is the real deal that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I want people to know that there are always a few things crop up, but it's pretty hard to get away with anything that would be nefarious, as you say.
It very much is, and what we like to say, it's a low reward, high risk thing to try and do to meddle in any way in an election. It first of all does not happen with any regularity. Statistically speaking, it's actually non-existent in terms of real voter fraud that happens. Some things do happen, but when you look at all the votes that are cast in a year or a number of years, it doesn't even show up as a blip there. And and so I would just say that again, low reward, high risk for something that you would have to, it's almost impossible to, like you say, to do anything that would manipulate the election. But then you also have dedicated election administrators who are making sure that does not happen.
And this toxic society right now, people should leave their guns at home.
Yes, I would. No reason to bring a gun to a polling place.
People are bringing guns out now and doing crazy things.
Yes.
You will have police around in and out of different places, I imagine.
Actually, no, we will not. So we do not. The idea of having law enforcement presence at polling locations is something that election administrators do not like. It has an intimidating and chilling effect, certainly for certain communities specifically. Of course, if there are problems, that police may have to be called out in certain circumstances. But again, like going back to why we don't want poll officials being law enforcement officers, that kind of thing, to kind of separate that out from the voting experience.
Okay. Alex, would you like to encourage people to vote?
Yes, I would say, first off, nmvote.org is what people should know in their mind. That's our one-stop kind of shop for all things voting related. You can request your absentee ballot, register to vote, find out polling locations, download that sample ballot, all that kind of thing. And I would just say, it's a very important election like we've been talking about, and get out there, make your voice heard, contact your county clerk or your Secretary of State's office for the trusted information about this election. That's definitely something I should emphasize as well, that get your information about voting in elections from trusted sources. Don't just trust your uncle on Facebook who says says something about the election or voting. If you have questions, go to your county clerk, call your county clerk, call our office at the Secretary of State. These are trusted sources of information that that we try to get out there, because the misinformation, it's not quite as on top of mind anymore as it was a couple of years ago about the Russian interference and all that.
Right.
It's definitely still something that we work on, prevent, have to address. But the conversation shifted a lot to absentee balloting and and mail-in balloting. But people should should know that they're going to have a great experience on November 3rd, and that they should rely on their county clerks and Secretary of State for the trusted information about the election.
Okay, Alex, thank you so much for showing up.
Sure.
And good luck.
Thank you.
And tell the Secretary of State good luck. She's done a good job, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me.
And I would like to end it with this country is constantly reinventing itself. Since I was a kid, about every 25 years, new things come in, and it's a reinvented country all the time. And for 300 years, we have fought for the right to vote. We've protected it in our daily lives. And this is a significant presidential election. Don't waste it. Let your conscience be your guide. Get out and vote. Make calls to encourage voting, and bring a friend to the polls. And thank you, Santa Fe.